Thanks so much for letting me be part of the Rendezvous this year for PCEC. I'm thrilled to be here. And I want to talk about climate change in our region, and especially what I see are the opportunities and the challenges. I think climate change is on everybody's mind these days, and it's because we see more and more of these climate-related disasters around the world. I think we're realizing that climate change is both costly and it's also deadly. I was reading just recently that over 5 million people die each year from climate change. And in our region, what we're experiencing, I think most acutely, is drought. I just got this map a couple of days ago, but the entire state is in drought, severe, extreme to exceptional drought. And it's in fact the worst drought that we've seen since they've been developing this monitoring system. So 20 years, and I suspect for several decades, it's the worst drought. We also lived through an extreme wildfire season this year. And even though we didn't have so many fires in our region, we experienced the health consequences of smoke coming from other places. So we are not immune to climate change in this region, not at all. In June, we released what is the first climate assessment of an ecosystem, and what a grand ecosystem to start with. We wanted to bore in and look deeper at what climate change means for the Greater Yellowstone region, shown by the black line here. And in particular, bore even deeper than that and see what it means for individual watersheds. So Park County is in this upper Yellowstone watershed, and I'll provide a little bit of information about what's happening there. This was a 2.5-year project to put this assessment together, and it involved collaborators from the USGS, Montana State University, University of Wyoming, Greater Yellowstone Coalition, and Mountain Works. I'm just going to show you a couple of data points from the assessment, and this is the temperature record, because temperature is what's happening in this region, in our region. So here's a temperature curve showing you how much warming or cooling there's been from 1900 and what's projected for the end of the century. There's been a little bit of warming in the early part of the 20th century, but since 1950, there's been pretty steady warming. And now we're about 2 degrees Fahrenheit warming in the upper Yellowstone than we were in 1950. The two lines going into the future are sort of pathways of how our future could look. The red line is an extreme scenario where we do nothing to reduce greenhouse gas warming, but probably we're on the blue line where there's going to be some flattening of the curve. And we're going to be looking at about 5 degrees warming in upper Yellowstone at the end of the century. That's really quite a lot. And warming affects everything in this region. Everything's being driven by warmer temperatures because it affects whether we get rain or whether we get snow. Here's a graph from the report showing you 1950 to 2100. And the green is the elevations dominated by rain. Blue is the elevations dominated by snow, and red, orange, and yellow are the slushy zone in between that we all hate. In 1950, our snow line was at about 7,000 feet, but because it's warmer, it's been steadily rising in elevation. And as that warming continues, by the end of the century, snow line will be at about 10,000 feet. So we're forcing snow line higher and higher up the mountains, and you can see that on these maps. The blue is the area of snow in 1990 in this graph. And here we move through the 21st century so that at the end of the 21st century, there's hardly any snow at all. It's just on the highest peaks. For upper Yellowstone, Park County, this represents a 44% loss in snowpack. And snowpack is our reservoir of water through the rest of the year, right? And we're already seeing since 1950 that this reservoir is changing. We see, for example, that it melts and drains really quickly in the spring. And so the amount of water in the streams has been anomalously high since 1950 in March, April, and May. And then we go into the summer and we've we've used up our snowpack and the streams are lower. The flow in the streams is lower. So we go from high flow to low flow. And that's a trend that's going to continue to the end of the century and get worse. So what does climate change mean for us in Park County? We're going to be living with more heat, and we're going to be living with summer drought. Heat is going to come in the form of more days over 90, less days of frost, and drought is going to come simply because we've lost our snowpack. And as a result of that, we're going to be living with ecological change. We can already see that animals are adjusting their ranges to accommodate climate change. Grizzly bears are on the move, wolverine populations are declining, toads and frogs are having a hard time, whitebark pines getting clobbered at high elevations, and migratory birds are arriving before their food sources are available. We're going to be living with uncertainty. Think about it, warmer temperatures, less snow, snow to rain, snow's going to melt sooner, we're going to go into summers being drier. And that puts a lot of stress on economies that depend on winter snowpack, and also on late season irrigation and communities that need reliable supplies of water. There's going to be more wildfires, that's for sure. We thought 1988 was a big deal, but we're probably going to see fires, large fires every year. And if they're not burning in our county, they're going to be burning somewhere else, and we're going to experience the smoke. And then there's health risks. It's not just smoke, it's heat and what that does to our heart and lungs, what it does to our mental health. We're going to see more water and insect transmitted diseases, and impacts on vulnerable parts of the population. People that are far from services, old, young, people that live in poverty, people with health conditions, and pregnant women. And as was pointed out, on top of climate change, we're dealing with more people. More people are coming to this region to visit it because where they live is impossibly hot, is my interpretation. And they're trying to get away. More people are moving here because they want to enjoy the amenities. And both of these put tremendous pressure on our infrastructure, on our communities, on our backcountry, on our waterways. At the same time, the climate is changing. So what do we do? What's the opportunities? How do we get beyond what Greta Thunberg is calling the blah, blah, blah of climate talk? What can we do? And we really have two paths. One is to flatten the curve, and this means flatten the temperature curve and reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. Now, this is a systematic problem that's going to involve governments and industry, but I still think in Park County, we can envision what a decarbonized place this would be if we could reduce our carbon footprint. And we also, I think, need to be much more politically active and put climate change at the top of the list of concerns. The other thing that we need to do is plan for change. And this is where I think PCEC is very well positioned to lead us. Plan for change means plan for ecosystem change, the services they provide, and the communities that are going to be impacted by these changes. So what can PCEC do? Well, I think they can lead us in the development of climate adaptation priorities for the Upper Yellowstone. And by this, I mean, they can develop a list of specifics for how we can tackle climate change in this particular region. So think about ecosystems. Why don't we develop some real specific plans around climate smart conservation? We should identify waterways and landscapes that are critical habitat for creating connectivity for wildlife. Think about water. How do we share water with human and non-human users in ways that satisfy the needs of agriculture, recreation, and municipalities? I think we're all hoping there's going to be some federal money coming down the pike to help us with infrastructure. Do we have a list of bridges and roads and culverts that are most in need of fortification so that they can withstand climate surprises that are coming down the road? We need to prepare for more fires and make communities more fire resilient. We need to really help people plan to protect buildings and homes and ensure human safety in the as more fires are coming down the road. And then we need to make sure our social safety net is strong and active. We need to be sure that we don't leave any vulnerable populations behind. Do we know who those vulnerable populations are? Are they going to be protected from heat? Are they going to be protected from smoke? I think these are things we need to factor in, and PCEC, I think, is the group to do it. So just in closing, I want to shout out again about the Greater Yellowstone Climate Assessment. It's available online, and if you have any questions about it, please contact me by email. I'm happy to answer questions. So thanks again for having me here.